Now, with as much time as it takes to make the average video game, it's amazing that developers are still able to implement items into them that most players are not meant to find. Everything from credits to pop culture cameos have been hidden inside your favorite titles as Easter eggs and references. But some of the most fascinating of all of these are wieldable weapons, and that's what we're here to talk about today. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 greatest hidden video game weapons. Number 10, the experimental MIRV. Fallout 3. Now, if you play Fallout 3 without really going out of your way to find everything, you'll likely stumble across an audio log or two called the Keller Family Transcripts. There are actually 5 of them throughout the game, and they are as well hidden as they are seemingly pointless. However, their true purpose is to guide you to the most powerful weapon within the game, because if you decipher the messages in the logs, it will lead you to the game's National Guard armory. There, you must navigate a hidden labyrinth within, and at the end of its path, you'll find a room containing the experimental MIRV. Clearly a weapon never intended to be unleashed upon the wasteland, the MIRV is capable of firing 8 mini-nukes at once, and considering that one nuke is capable of a devastating amount of damage, this is sheer overkill at its finest. Not only is it incredibly difficult to find, but the experimental MIRV also requires a horrendous amount of ammunition to fire the damn thing, which isn't easy to come by itself either. That being said, the feeling of using it for the first time, well, it makes it all that worthwhile, until you blow yourself up seconds later. Number 9, the hand cannon, Dead Space 2. It's hard enough for most people to make their way through the horrifying campaign of Dead Space 2 once, much less do it again on the incredibly difficult hardcore mode that becomes available after the credits roll. But doing so provides you with a devastating weapon, possibly the most so in all the galaxy, a foam finger called the hand cannon. Yes, the ultimate weapon in one of the most terrifying and dark games ever made is a foam finger that makes a bang and pew sound when you fire it. As ridiculous as you may feel while using it, the weapon itself is capable of destroying any regular enemy in a single shot. And if that wasn't enough, it has unlimited ammunition and can fire as fast as you can pull the trigger, so it is the perfect apology for the hell you just had to go through in hardcore mode. Number 8, the unlabored flawlessness, Ninja Gaiden. Now, the unlabored flawlessness isn't only the coolest name ever devised for a video game weapon, but it's a pretty hefty piece of badass weaponry to boot. But most Ninja Gaiden players will never stumble upon it, because the weapon is hidden within the practically useless wooden sword. You really never have any reason to use the sword at all, and will likely not understand why you would ever want to invest precious resources in order to upgrade the item to its full potential, especially when doing so never seems to improve it at all. However, if you do commit to upgrading the wooden sword to its resource-draining maximum level, it'll morph into the wooden paddle known as the unlabored flawlessness. In a game that is hard enough to beat you silly even if you're playing like an expert, most people will never dream of chasing after an item that are so damn much of them. Number 7, the Drake Sword, Dark Souls. Now, whenever I hear someone is having trouble getting started with Dark Souls, I always have one response. Bro, do you even Drake Sword? I mean, there is a series of weapons that you can get early on in Dark Souls by cutting the tails off of bosses, but the Drake Sword is the first thing that you'll have the opportunity to acquire. It's also the one that you are least likely to discover naturally, as the dragon it's attached to is far too powerful for you to take down when you first come across it. However, by cheesing the game a bit and shooting about 100 arrows into its tail at a spot where it cannot possibly retaliate, you can make the absurdly powerful Drake Sword your own. Dark Souls may not be a forgiving game, but for those in the know, the hidden Drake Sword is a fantastic way to even the odds very early on. Number 6, Mr. Toots, Red Faction Armageddon. Now, it's not uncommon for video game developers to put a weapon in their game that only becomes available to the player after they beat the story once or twice. But what is uncommon for said weapon, though, is for it to be a stuffed unicorn that farts rainbows. Enter Mr. Toots, an utterly bizarre creation of a particularly bored designer, accessible after beating the game at least once, and even then, it's hidden behind a series of walls and seemingly deadly drops that give the player no indication that they're hiding anything special. At the end of this series of obstacles worthy of Indiana Jones is the fabled Mr. Toots, and as you might imagine, it's not only the most creative weapon in the game mechanically, but those flatulent rainbows are by far the most powerful projectiles in all of Red Faction. Number 5, Hadouken, Mega Man X. Anyone who actually managed to not only beat Mega Man X, but collect every single item and power-up in the game deserves a round of applause. If you have 100% completed Mega Man X, it's possible to unlock Ryu's famous Hadouken from Street Fighter and add it to Mega Man's arsenal. Now, the reason that you're probably only just hearing about this now, even after you previously devoted hundreds of hours to completing it, is down to the method for doing so being incredibly obscure. It requires you to head back to the Armored Armadillo stage after beating the game and collect a seemingly standard power pellet resting on the top of a cliff 4 times, which is done by killing your character each time, then going back to the same spot again, and finally you'll be taken to where you can acquire the devastating Street Fighter projectile. Is it worth it? Well, considering that it can one-shot kill anything but the final boss, yeah, it kind of is. Number 4. Bigoron's Sword, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Now, there were 2 kinds of kids that played Ocarina of Time. Those that thought the legendary Master Sword was the strongest weapon in the game, and those that quietly laughed at them behind their back with deserved superiority. Now, considering that the quest for the most powerful weapon in Hyrule starts unannounced by acquiring a simple unhatched egg, it's easy to understand why many Ocarina players never knew that Bigoron's Sword existed. Its questline is such an obscure series of fetch quests and favors that most players probably felt a genuine sense of accomplishment discovering even a few of them, much less all 12 events that make up the entire process. Things become so difficult and bizarre late on in the quest that it begins to feel like the developers are deliberately trolling you for how much time this is all taking. And gamers have long debated if the slightly impractical two-handed sword is even worth the effort, but the experience of discovering just how to get it, well, it's worth the effort in and of itself. Number 3. Sword of Kings, Earthbound. Now, Prince Pooh is perhaps the oddest of the main party characters in Earthbound. Not only is he a bona fide prince of mystical royalty traveling with an otherwise pseudo-normal group of heroes of destiny, but he's also the only character in the main party who can't wield a weapon. That is, unless you are either particularly patient or extremely lucky. You see, within the game's Stonehenge level, there's a fairly difficult enemy known as the Starman Super. Now, what few Earthbound players know about this annoying foe is that there's actually a 1 in 128 chance that they can drop the only weapon in the game that Prince Pooh is able to equip, the Sword of Kings. The low probability factor of this occurring has led to many stories of Earthbound veterans trying the process hundreds of times without success. Of course, there are those players that accidentally got it on their first try, and those of us that have played the game for years without seeing this sword, well, we hate them the most. Number 2. Excalibur 2 Final Fantasy IX. The Final Fantasy series is no stranger to hidden weapons. Nearly every game in the franchise has featured at least one item that you'll have to go far out of your way to acquire. Of all of them though, Excalibur 2 may just take the cake in terms of obscurity. To get it, not only do you have to interact with a seemingly unimportant pillar in the game's final dungeon, but you have to reach that pillar in under 12 hours of game time. Considering that Final Fantasy IX could easily take you 50 hours plus to beat on a normal run, this is speedrun levels of quickness. Getting to the end of the game under that time has inspired a legion of fans to create a series of elaborate techniques, all designed to shave mere minutes off the timer. Of course, most people have simply resorted to a creative method of cheating that involves removing the game's disc at the correct time, and given the absurd difficulty of the real challenge, it's hard to blame them. And number 1, the Scarab Gun, Halo 2. Whoever decided to hide the Scarab Gun in Halo 2 was kind of crazy, but whoever discovered it first was just out of their bloody mind. The basic process of finding the gun sounds relatively simple enough, as you just have to fly a Banshee through a tunnel and onto a bridge where the gun rests. The problem is that you need the Banshee to follow you through the tunnel much of the way without you actually flying it. Then you need to shoot the wings off of it without destroying it so it can fit through a smaller path. Then, and this is the fun part, you need to hijack the Banshee right before the next part of the game loads, which is basically boils down to just a few milliseconds of a time window. Mess that last part up and you'll be starting all over again. And that's if you're keeping up so far anyway. If you somehow manage to complete this incredibly frustrating and painfully difficult process, you'll then have to fly the broken Banshee to an obscure bridge marked only by a single traffic cone. Your reward for this considerable endeavor is a gun that will only last you through the remainder of this very short level, but it can cause nuclear levels of destruction to anything you pointed at. The Scarab Gun is infuriating to acquire, incredibly obscure, obscenely powerful, and an experience in and of itself to earn. It is the perfect hidden weapon. And there we go, my friends. Those were the 10 greatest hidden video game weapons. I hope that you enjoyed that, and let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome, my friends. I hope that you are treating yourself well with love and respect, and I hope that you're smashing your life goals today. If you want to follow me on the social medias, you can do so by going over to Twitter or to Instagram, where it's @RetroJ, but the O is a 0, or you can swing by the Future Game Show or FGS, where I'm doing all of my regular gaming content. So I hope to see you over there. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.